Thank you all for being here today. I'm Kelly Wall, the chapter leader of Women for Kansas, Lawrence Douglas County chapter. Thank you for getting out on a rainy day, and as being a Kansan, you know we always appreciate the rain whenever we can get it. So we're happy to have it raining. Thank you to Will Haynes and the Watkins Museum for this community space, which is open and free to the public if you're giving a community program that's open and free for everyone to come to. So just so you all know that, it is a community space where we can have our meetings, and we thank you very much. Just a little bit about Women for Kansas. This is a group that was started during the Brownback years as a pushback against extreme policies, and the intent was to prevent Brownback from being reelected. So we didn't meet that goal, but we now have 13 chapters across the state, including a virtual chapter. You can find out the information on womenforkansas.org, and every month there's a virtual chapter you can join online on Zoom, and then of course we have monthly programs here as well, and then across the state you can tell your friends about. Look it up. There's more chapters. I'm going to read you our legislative priorities and our mission statement. Our mission is to recruit, educate, and motivate women and all Kansans, welcome, all Kansans, to actively participate in the process of electing moderates to public office who will advocate for moderate policies. So I would just say that does mean pushing back against extreme policies and extremists. We stand for constitutional rights. Our legislative priorities are a fair, progressive tax system that adequately funds public services, a court system free from political influence. I'm going to speak just a minute about the constitutional amendment. Equal rights for all. The Constitution protects all people in our country, citizens as well as non-citizens, for things like due process, reproductive rights and bodily autonomy, separation of church and state, advocacy of health care as a human right, stronger laws to prevent gun violence. We stand with Moms Demand Action and their continuing fight for common sense gun laws. Preservation of excellence in public schools and higher education. Recognition of and support for the arts as vital to our quality of life, and protection of our environment and ecosystems against avoidable degradation. So those are our legislative priorities. We have at the back table where my friend Deb Umberger is sitting, we have postcards. You can write your legislators, both we are watching you postcards, as well as thank you for people like Governor Kelly upholding our rights and standing for our priorities. And we have information, we have palm cards about the constitutional amendment. There will be two this year on our ballots, one in August and one in November. The one in August has to do with the Supreme Court justices and how they are selected versus elected to Supreme Court. The big issues there, we're promoting vote no on both amendments. On the Supreme Court justices, it's to keep our courts non-political versus running political races, getting political money involved, and changing from a merit-based system to a popularity money-based system. So we're saying vote no on that amendment. The November amendment is about proof of citizenship and the determinants to vote, which already it's illegal to vote if you're not a citizen, and so it actually prevents more challenges and barriers to voting. So we're just promoting, and we will have yard signs, buttons, hopefully some billboards, joining ACLU and Kansas United for court system free from political influence. We'll be promoting that as well. So just to speak about the money for a minute, we've had membership dues in the past. Welcome, Senator Francisco. Thank you for coming. Thank you.
We've been talking about immigration quite a bit in the Senate, so I thought I'd better be here and learn some.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for the work you do on our behalf. Let me regain where I was.
Sorry.
On those, I'm happy to have you, very happy to have you and your work for us. So besides our sign-in sheet, we have the postcards in the back, addresses to write to legislators. We have friends who are promoting bumper stickers, First Amendment rights for all, and the Arc of Justice is a locally produced newsletter, e-newsletter, free to all, and it lists numerous activist opportunities across our state. So if you're interested in that, there's a short copy. I looked today that today's edition was 75 pages long. So you have to kind of search and look for your local information or what you're interested in, but the email address, if you don't receive that, is very informative, not only for Lawrence, the Kansas City area, but across the state. Activist opportunities. There's a lot going on. So a priority is to take care of yourself. And we're hearing from many people, build community. This is an opportunity to build our community. So I thank you for coming out. I want to do something, I want to read from a book and promote the Women for Kansas Book Club. But I just wanted to ask, how many people here remember from typing class, now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of their country. At the time, I thought that sounded like in the past, a call, right? That sounded like, oh, yeah. This is our time. This is our time to come to the aid of our country. And I'm just going to promote this book, Giving Up is Unforgivable by Joyce Vance, newly out. It's the book that the Women for Kansas Book Club is reading, and we'll have discussion on Tuesday, February 24th at the Lawrence Public Library downstairs in the meeting room. And I'm just going to read one quote from Joyce Vance. It's an educated public capable of informed civil discourse that sustains effective, fair government. Accountability happens when citizens demand it. Sometimes they must demand it loudly and persistently. This is undoubtedly one of those moments. So that's where we find ourselves today. I thank you again for coming. We also have Sanctuary Alliance representatives available in the back. They have some materials. They are currently providing trainings across our community. I heard that they have 6 out of 10 days. They're busy doing these trainings, and so this is something we want to make available, the information available to everyone. So now I'm going to introduce today's speaker, Anne Parelkar of Parelkar Immigration Law. She's a member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, the Kansas Bar Association, the Missouri Bar Association, and the American Bar Association. Licensed to practice law in Kansas, Arkansas, and Missouri. She opened her immigration law practice in 2021. Before that, she took cases on, solo practitioner for friends and family, and stayed home with her children until they both started school. And I just want to say, thank you for those priorities. And I know many women often have delayed participation in a career or politics or volunteerism because their number one priority is their children, and that's the first line of democracy, right? Is having a healthy, wonderful family. So that's a goal for everyone. Thank you. She is going to present our program today on immigration, facts and misunderstandings about the path to citizenship. And we are having the program videotaped by Jerry Jost, and it will be saved and uploaded after Jerry does his magic with editing on the YouTube channel for Women for Kansas. So if you have any friends say, oh, I wish I could have gone, the seed fair's going on, there's other activities going on. You say, oh, well, you can watch it. It'll be on the YouTube channel on Women for Kansas. So help me welcome Anne Parelkar, and afterwards we'll have questions and answers.
Thank you much. Okay, y'all can hear me? Do I need to be louder? All right, I'm sorry. It's actually pronounced Parelkar.
Oh, thank
But
you.
it's a really hard name, and I get Parelkar a lot. And actually, you didn't add any letters, which is pretty impressive. Sometimes I get a lot of weird names. So thanks for having me. I love what you said about this is the time for people to take action. I think. And I won't talk about that a lot. We do have a presentation or a roundtable this afternoon from 2 to 4 at ECM. If you want to join us, you're more than welcome. Bring your friends, bring everybody, no matter what side of the aisle you fall on. We want to have a good discussion. But I believe you're right. We're all being called to serve our country right now, and this is a huge part of doing that. So thank you all for being here, and thank you for letting me come. Everything she said is correct. I will tell you, if you look up my website for Parelkar Immigration Law, you're not going to find it. Somebody pointed that out to me. It's set to private because I actually am not taking clients right now. I was planning on winding it down, but then I realized this is needed. So I'm keeping it open so that I can do this under my law firm, separate from the other things that I'm doing right now. So. I am slightly afraid that this is going to be boring, and I apologize. I'm going to try to keep it as fun as I can, but it's not. Law is oftentimes not that fun. So first, I was going to talk about our constitutional rights for immigrants. Can y'all see that okay? Does it need to be bigger? Okay. They do have a lot of protections under our Constitution. Some of our Constitution is saved for citizens, like the right to vote. They do have a First Amendment right. They're allowed to speak. They're allowed to express themselves. They're allowed to have religion, but it can be used so if they make social media posts that are questionable, they can be brought up for immigration purposes. So it can prevent people from getting immigration benefits. It's been for a while that they had to provide their social media handles and information if they were applying outside of the country at a consular's office to come to the country. But last year they changed it to where everybody has to do that. So even when you're in the country already, they're asking for that. So I put now they do it on the naturalization application. It was never asked for before. The adjustment of status, which I'll talk about what that is in a minute. The application for asylum, application for travel document, which is used for various purposes, and a petition to remove conditions on residence. When you get married to a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident, you're actually a conditional permanent resident, unless you've been married for 3 years already. So if you're just like my husband and I, we got married and we filed before we had been married for 2 years. So after 2 years, we had to file for removal of conditions and prove that we're still, in a relationship together and we have a valid marriage. So that's what the removal of conditions is. Fifth Amendment and 14th Amendment, this is the one that everyone's been arguing about. And I've actually been talking about this since the second time I spoke in Topeka. And they told me to keep it short, so I just talked about this. And I said, look, let's have a lesson on the law. Everybody is entitled to due process in this country. If you are in our boundaries, you are entitled to due process. So that includes even undocumented people. And if you look at the wording, especially the 14th Amendment here, it talks about all persons born or naturalized are citizens, and talks about no state shall make a law or enforce a law that will abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens. And then they switch, right? It's deliberate. They switch. No person will be deprived of, no person of life, liberty, or property, all right? So that's key. So if you're talking to people and they don't understand whether immigrants get due process, and you've tried, well, how are they going to know that? How are you going to prove that that you belong here if they don't give you an opportunity to show otherwise, and they're still not getting it? Well, then you can point them to that. And there's also a court case, Plyler v. Doe. There's many more, but that one is where the Supreme Court actually explains that yes, all people are entitled to due process when they're around boundaries. Any questions so far? If you have a question, feel free to shout it out at me, or if you want to contribute something, I'd love to have that too. The Sixth Amendment right, they do have a right to counsel in a criminal case, but they actually don't have a right to counsel in their immigration proceedings. So that, especially when we're talking about kids that don't have a right to a lawyer and can't have a lawyer, can't speak, can't navigate the system. I mean, you can see kids of all ages going through our immigration proceedings with nobody to help them. So I don't know what the answer is there, but there is no constitutional right to it. They have to be able to afford it. And I will tell you that they work very hard and they find ways to pay even when there is no way to pay. So that's something. They're very hardworking and smart and honest and genuine people. At least all of the immigrants that I know, and I know a lot. Yes, sir.
What's considered a speedy trial?
A speedy trial? Well, there's actually.
Is there a time period?
Well, there is. So there is, I think they can't be held, in this situation, they're not supposed to be held for more than 180 days. And then it's considered a constitutional violation. I was actually reading some case law on this recently, where they've been holding people a lot longer. And this particular case that I was reading, he had asked to delay his case. He had asked for a new court date. So it got kicked down the road. But then the government started postponing court dates, and he ended up being there for I think it was over 15 months with no hearing. So that's actually, I think it's pending right now, that court case. But so there are rules, but you know we all recognize that sometimes they're not following the rules. So and actually back to the constitutional rights. Yes, sir.
So when you say detained or arrested, speedy trial?
Well, if you're being held, then you have a right to
Detained?
speedy trial.
Detained?
Like if you're in jail, if they're going to hold you. If they're not going to hold you, then they don't have the same time limit. But if they're going to detain you and you're going to be in jail waiting, then they need to do it within a certain amount of time because they're depriving you of your freedom while they're doing that, right? So yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so when you say that they don't have a right to counsel, it sounded like you were saying they don't have a right to free counsel, but if they
Correct.
are able to pay counsel, they do have a right to
Correct.
use that.
Yes, ma'am. That is correct. Thank you for clarifying that for me. Yes, they have a right to hire their own counsel. One won't be provided for them, but they do have a right to get one. And that's actually some of what we're seeing is, lawyers aren't able to find where their clients are. We've heard instances of where they're, instead of being allowed an hour to talk to their clients, they're only getting 30 minutes now. And sometimes they're not allowed to do it privately. And that's one of the most important things about an attorney-client relationship is that when you go to an attorney and you're asking for legal advice, I can't say anything outside of that. And if they're listening in, well, that confidentiality is broken, right? So that's actually a huge problem. So thank you. One more thing about constitutional rights, and I forgot to put it. I apologize that my slideshow is not as complete as I would have liked it to be. I don't know if y'all heard about the chaos in Olathe yesterday. So around 10 o'clock in the morning, we started getting messages coming in that there was a raid on an apartment complex. And before they did that raid, they were actually looking in the windows at the Boys and Girls Club next door. She went out there and she helped coordinate, blocking off the entrances, not letting people in if they're suspicious. But we had gotten a word that there was going to be a raid at 3 o'clock. And when I heard that, I had to put everything down and just go out there. So I was out there from 3 till about 6:30. And so I didn't get to put as much time into my slideshow as I had hoped, but I thought they'll understand. So, but back to constitutional rights. We also know that DHS internally released some memos to certain agents. They didn't make it public, but it got leaked. And this was very recently that we found out that they were telling them that they don't have to follow the Fourth Amendment They don't have to have a warrant to go inside people's homes. That is absolutely incorrect. That is absolutely a constitutional violation. And those memos are not law. They're just internal memos that say this is what you should do. And to me, it's just another line that shouldn't have been crossed and should have been the end of it. But so I just wanted to point that out. They have been told, and actually there was a recent memo, I think, that we found out about, where they've been told that they can arrest anybody if that person might walk away while they're waiting on a warrant. So they could arrest any of us just because we can walk away from that situation before they can get a warrant. Yes, sir.
Can local police elect or arrest ICE agents if they're doing something illegal?
I don't see why they couldn't.
Here is the problem we're finding. If local police departments choose not to work with ICE, they are losing grants and funding. So they are being forced, in their minds, to work with them. So it's a catch-22. Either they're facing community backlash or they're facing funding backlash from the government.
I will say this though. Constitutional rights. Yes, ma'am.
Does someone have a right to ask the ICE agent arresting them for identification?
Absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
You can ask them. Now, whether they'll tell you anything,
I mean, because how do we know
I agree with you. I think
if
it's.
they're ICE or just some schmo?
I completely agree with you. And the problem, with the immigration enforcement, and the one thing that I hear all the time is, well, Obama deported more people. And yet, I did not see any of this, right? We can enforce our laws, we can keep our country safe without terrorizing innocent people, without terrorizing soccer moms, without terrorizing people that just are trying to make their lives better. People that, to me, are no different than my ancestors who came here to try to make their lives better, than my husband who came to try to make his life better. That's what most of these people are. And the thing is, these people are fleeing that violence in their home countries, so they also don't want to hear. Everybody agrees, get the violent criminals. But get the violent criminals, stop getting the soccer moms. And they've just gone so far beyond that. Yes, sir.
Well, what he asked about, can local police protect you in these situations is really a valid thing. You call 911 when you're in trouble and you need help because someone is breaking the law, possibly harming you. The very things that they say are our rights, if someone breaks into our house armed, you could shoot them.
Right.
Now, that's pretty extreme. But if the actual agency that is doing the prosecution is breaking the law, what are the alternatives for citizens?
We have to come together and demand justice. I mean, I think it's all of us coming together and saying enough.
And I would just,
If I can.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've spoken with the local police department on
It's fear.
Absolutely.
And when they even, not only immigrants, but U.S. citizens complaining to their congresspeople could be on a list of people to get their houses broken into out of retribution and vengeance. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
if I could just interject, I think that where we're gonna see it played out is gonna be in the courts
Yeah.
eventually, and that's why it's so important that we protect our courts, we keep our courts impartial, and that's where that's the final line of defense unless Congress stands up stronger than they
And
are.
they're actively after that.
But thank you for the question,
Thank you for that.
or response.
And yeah, thanks for the question. Yes, ma'am. Hi, how are you?
Hi. So does this presentation touch on slavery? Because I have a question about slavery that I didn't ask yet.
It doesn't, but we do have a time for questions at the end if you wanna, are you okay to save it?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Alright, I'm gonna move on then, and I'm just gonna talk about immigration, what our laws really are. We've got legal paths, of course, to come to the United States. Some of those are up here. We've got humanitarian paths, we've got immigrant visas, and those are people that are coming, they're planning on staying here forever. And non-immigrant visas, those are actually like your students. They cannot plan to stay here if they're coming on a student visa. And then we have non-legal immigration, right? So in or without inspection, that's what you think of when you think of illegal immigration or whatever you want to call it. It's somebody sneaking in. We don't know that they're coming, and we don't know who they are, and they've just snuck in, right? But then you also have wave through, and this is where you actually come to the border, and the immigration officer sees you, and they wave you through. I bet that this is not as common now as it used to be. Yes,
This is what they did to my brother-in-law and his wife.
they waved them through.
They said, hold up your passports, and they had papers with them, and they didn't want to see them. They waved them through, and
That's
so
interesting.
that my mother and my sister-in-law complied. My sister-in-law was driving, she complied and
Yeah.
drove through, because she wasn't gonna, she was
You're
compliant.
not gonna ask.
Yeah, they had everything ready, and they just said, show us your passports, and bam, and they were waved through. So they went to the next port of entry to announce themselves, because they couldn't do it there, they were told to leave.
Right.
Yeah,
Very interesting.
so that's what happened to my family.
And then we have visa overstays. So you come on a non-immigrant visa, or maybe your permanent resident status, you've lost it for some reason, and you just don't leave. And that's probably, the visa overstays, I think, are usually the most we see for someone that's become undocumented. And you know, you have to think, and we'll kind of get into this in a minute, but like, especially like the laborers that are coming to work, they come on usually H-2 visas, and those, they're not allowed to stay. They can only stay for a certain amount of time, and then they're gonna have to renew that visa to come back. So, you know, like, who wants to travel every year to try to just send money home for your family? So a lot of times they end up staying. And then sometimes visitors come and they just don't leave, you know, just stuff like that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, and the Haitians in Minneapolis, I think, from what I understand, most of them were in that temporary visa,
So
and they were here like 12 years, I think, or more. I think how do you define temporary? Is as long as Haiti is in the kind of shape it is, they can't go back?
It's a country by country basis. They actually have a test. We're actually going to talk about that in a minute. But yes, you're right. It's dependent on the country conditions of their home country.
Okay.
There are a lot of questions, and this is a great discussion. Maybe let's let her get a little bit further, and then we'll see if she answers some of them as she goes.
So, family-based immigration, it's what you think it is. There's immediate relatives, and then there's the rest of them. So your immediate relative is your spouse or your unmarried children under 21. There's always a visa readily available for them. You can always get it. For a lot of the others, there's a long wait time, which I'll show in just a minute. If you're in the US, you can actually adjust status here. So my husband was actually on an H-1B when we got married, and so he could adjust while he was here. And he could have potentially worked if he filed for what's called an EAD card, which would have given him work authorization outside of where he was working for his H-1B, but he never did that. And then so the other family-based petitions, there's a lot of wait time on some of those, and I'm gonna show you guys how to find it. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on it, but this website right here, and if you just type in visa bulletin, you will, oh, I can't go.
Okay, so it's the bottom, number
Yes.
5 visa bulletin on your
Yes.
slide.
Let me see. Angela's niece taught me how to do a hotspot, so maybe I can get it up, but I'll talk a little bit more about this while I get it up.
I'll let her know then.
I don't wanna waste time. But the visa bulletin will show you exactly how long the waits are, but I really want you guys to see how long the waits can be, because that's important, and a lot of people are confused about that. But while I'm doing that, let me keep going. Okay, We'll just have to look. We'll just have to.
Do you need a hotspot?
I can do it, but I don't want to. Then my password comes up, right? That's what I thought about. I guess I can. We'll go back to it if we have time. But you can look it up. Just Google visa bulletin, and you will see some of the waits are 20 years. I actually have, and we're going to talk about. Here's our employment-based immigration. I actually have a friend who came, and they filed for their visa in 2013. And they are still waiting on their green card. And so while they're in the country, they have to maintain a status all this time.
Spot should be on.
You want to come back, put it?
So if they're waiting on a green card, does that determine like legality of their status while they're waiting? That's a legal status to be here and waiting?
Okay, so yes. If you filed for, it's called 485, it's an adjustment of status. If you file that with a petition for the visa, which would be, it's an I-130 for a family-based visa, or an I-140 for employment. You have to have a labor authorization, you have to have all of this documentation and paperwork and all of these qualifications before you can file for it. But yes, while you're waiting, you could, they could get off of their H-1B technically and work on their EAD, because they can file for an EAD, and EAD again is just work authorization. It allows them to work legally. They could, but then if anything happens to their pending adjustment application, if something goes wrong with it, the employer decides they're not going to pursue it, any number of things could happen, then they've lost that application, and now they're off their H-1B, so they don't have any safety net if there's a denial for some reason, anything like that. Now, on the student visas, the what I call non-dual intent, thank you, visas, they actually lose their visa. They actually lose their visas if they file for adjustment. So like if a student comes, falls in love on campus, and they get married, well, now their student visa is gone if they file for a visa. Okay. 3 times now. Took me that long to open 3 times. All right, so this is your visa bulletin. And if you scroll down, you can see what the dates are for family-based immigration. And so you can see like Mexico it's back to 2006. They're still processing applications since 2006. Yes, ma'am.
If you hit the plus sign at the top, you can make it like a lot clearer. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yay! Lawyers are known for their tech. Oh, I didn't say that out loud, sorry.
No, it's true. The paralegals do everything. You can't figure anything out.
I dare her to fire me.
So that chart, explain the chart, so you can see different countries and then.
And their chargeability dates. So the first preference category, so when you look down at the chart, it says F1, right? So this explains what those are: unmarried sons and daughters of U.S. citizens. And this actually shows the cap, the number that are issued each year. So only 23,400. So there's a huge backlog, especially from these countries where we have a lot of people coming in. Mexico in particular, they're back to 2006. So they're just not processing applications that were filed in 2006. And same for employment-based visa. If we scroll down here, you can see, and this will give you an explanation of what each category is as well. But you can see the dates here. And so India for an EB2 is still they're processing applications from July 2013. And now they're telling people who are filing now that they may not live long enough to see their green cards ever. Yes, ma'am.
Did I understand you to say that there is a number limit on so many people from India, so many people from Mexico?
Yes, if it's not an immediate relative, like a spouse, every category after that has a weight, yes ma'am. And a number cap, yes, they all have a number cap. And actually, I think I've got it in here in just a second. What do we talk about? Okay, so these are the non-immigrant visas. These are the ones that we talk about where you can't be planning on staying, except for these 4. These do allow you what we call dual intent, so you can intend to stay forever if you're on one of these. If you're on any of these, and I just put all of these, I'm not going to go through them all, but I wanted you guys to see how many different visas there are, because there's just a huge number. But these are the ones that you have to be planning to go back, and if you look at the H-2A there, those are our agricultural workers that come in for a temporary time and then have to leave. So there's no path to remain in the country permanently and become a citizen if you're in this list. You'd have to somehow get over here on one of these, or you marry a citizen and file for a family visa. But if you don't have that, then. So yes, so then this is some of our humanitarian ways that we allow people to come in. Of course, we've got VAWA, which is the Violence Against Women's Act, which allowed a path for if you're abused by a certain individual, if your U.S. citizen spouse is abusing you, you can go and file for your own visa. We have the T visa, which is victims of trafficking, just what it says it is. The victims of abuse that are assisting law enforcement, so those for the domestic abuse victims, they actually have to cooperate and help law enforcement or the investigators in order to qualify for the visa. If they're not willing to do that, then they can't qualify for the U visa. And then we have a special immigrant juvenile visa. So these are children that need protection of the state, the juvenile courts. So a lot of the, if you hear of kids being brought over by coyotes, this is something that they sometimes can qualify for, and then they can stay. And then refugees. Refugees and asylum seekers are very similarly situated, except asylum seekers are inside the U.S. and refugees are outside applying. And if you look here, the cap for, if you look here, the cap for the number of refugees that we're allowing in for 2026 is 7,500. For some perspective, we allowed in 60,000 in 2023. So, so you can see why it is appealing to come to the U.S. and apply for asylum while you're here. Because if you're fleeing violence in your own country, you may not have the time to wait for a refugee visa to become available, or for them to process it even. Then you have your deferred action, which if you guys have heard of DACA, that's a deferred action. So those are people that they're here unless they can't qualify for it at some point, or if the U.S. decides to do away with it. And we're going to talk about DACA in a minute, but it's really not a great way to exist, because you're never, there's always an uncertainty in your life. Let's see. Humanitarian parole, that's the way a lot of folks come in. Ukraine, if you remember at the beginning of the conflict there, a lot of Ukrainians came in under humanitarian parole. And then they actually have to file more paperwork to keep that status, or sometimes countries will be designated with TPS, which is temporary protected status. And that just allows people a way to stay here and live here and work here legally while their home country is in turmoil. But there's a lot of litigation going on with the TPS. This administration, even last time, I think, tried really hard to get rid of TPS for a lot of countries, and they're doing it again. So these are the ones that are currently designated with for TPS, and these are the ones that are in a state of flux right here. So I just put, kind of where they all are. I'm not gonna read them for you, but any questions so far?
So temporary protective status is TPS, and that is a legal way to
Yes,
be in
they
the
are legal.
United States. But is there any action those people can take to move over to some other category?
They would have to qualify for another category. They could potentially apply for a student visa and go to school. If they fall in love and get married, then they have a path that way. But yeah, unless you qualify for a visa, there's nothing else you can do. This is, you will at some point have to go back. I mean, I guess potentially we could create a path for them at some point, but this administration's not gonna do that. And potentially their home country could just stay in turmoil their entire lives, I guess. But again, not a great way to live because you're always in a state of uncertainty. Yes, Ms. Ellen.
So people that have TPS are they eligible for federal benefits usually?
No. And we're gonna talk about actually
Can you
benefits
repeat
here
her
in a minute.
question?
I'm sorry?
Can you repeat her question?
She asked if people who are on TPS qualify for federal assistance. And I don't believe that they do, but I do have some information on welfare and stuff like that. So then we have the undocumented folks, the ways that they come in. And then we have this law. And it actually is a crime to enter the country illegally and without permission, right? This talks about that. It also talks about marriage fraud, so we call them sham marriages. If you get married for the purpose of an immigration benefit, you can get in big trouble, and that is also for the U.S. citizen that marries them, and potentially their attorney if they know that it's a sham marriage. So we also have to be careful about who we take. But let's see. So it's a crime to enter without an inspection. If you do it more than once, then the punishment can go up. And then it talks about the consequences. They're usually going to put you in removal proceedings. If they find you, you'll be inadmissible, so you won't be able to come back. Let's see. Any questions about that? Yes.
So it says repeated violations are felonies, so is it merely a misdemeanor to come to the
The
country?
first time offense is a misdemeanor, yes. And it's only punishable fine or 6 months in jail. But then if you come in again, there are increased punishments. So what didn't that say though? It said it's a crime to enter illegally, but it's not a crime to be here undocumented. So if you've overstayed a visa, you came in the right way. If you got waved through, they knew you were coming. So technically, you came in the right way. It's really just those people who enter without permission that sneak in that have committed a crime. So just being here, just existing in a place is actually not a crime. And when I talk about that, I like to point out, and it's right there on the side, look at that. So I'd love to point out, this is something that I learned in law school, and I don't know why it stuck with me all these years, but I did. And so there are two types of crimes. There's malum in se and malum prohibitum. Malum in se is your inherently evil crime, right? It's murder. It's very wrong. It's wrong because it's a sin against man, it's a sin against God, whoever you're saying it's a sin against, right? And then we have malum prohibitum. And those are things that are wrong because we've decided it's wrong, like driving without a license or driving over the speed limit. We have decided it's wrong. So I like to point out to people, entering a country or existing in a place that you're just not, that we say you're not supposed to exist, is really malum prohibitum, right? Like you're not doing anything inherently evil. It's bad because we've said it's bad. So I like to point that out to people when we're talking about, because some people, don't have, for some reason they're very okay with people being treated the way that they are. So I think that gives some perspective to it. So take that and use it if you're arguing with somebody. So asylum, you come at the port of entry with no documents. You could be removed immediately unless you express a fear to return to your home country, or you say, I plan to apply for asylum. And after you do that, they send you for what's called a credible fear interview. So you have to convince the officer that you are actually afraid to go home and you have reasons to be afraid to go home. let's see, if you fail the interview, they send you back. You can appeal it, but you have to do so within 7 days. So a lot of people that are coming in and gonna apply for that, they're probably not gonna know you have 7 days to appeal it. They're probably just going home. Let's see. If they've been removed the first time, so if they fail and they try to come back again, then there's an increased level that they have to meet that they call reasonable fear. And it's just, there's a little more scrutiny, you have to be a little more convincing. But if you think about it, who's coming through with evidence of their treatment from their home country? They probably don't have a passport, they probably don't have any other documentation, and they're almost certainly not coming with a stack of papers and evidence to show that they are afraid to go home. So these are just this is just a case, an example, where she was actually found not to have a credible fear of going home. She was from, does it say where she was from? Iran. And didn't want to go back because she was going to be forced to wear the veil and everything. But they said that was not enough for this. So here's the definition of persecution. It's actually, a lot of it's discretionary. It's case by case basis. So there's not really a clear cut answer. But here are some examples of infliction of harm, requires extreme level of conduct. A minor beating could be. Death threats alone could be, but if you look at these, there was a judge that said that being detained 3 times, tied to a chair, slapped and kicked was not persecution. Another judge ruled that being beaten 16 times with machetes, whips, and batons, being threatened and imprisoned for 6 weeks was not persecution. So it's kind of all over the place. Really hard to do if you don't have an attorney. I think I have a couple more. These are some examples of the physical harm that give you a better chance at getting in. Now, there's some places where the judges will say you don't have to be physically harmed to qualify for asylum, and there are other cases that say you do. So this was just something that I wanted to point out. If the Supreme Court hasn't ruled on it yet, it's controlled by the individual circuits. So that's the Court of Appeals. And then all the district courts under those circuits have to be controlled by those appellate decisions. So we end up with what we call a circuit split. And you've got, if I go over to Missouri, maybe I get a better treatment than if I go to, I don't know, California. Just made it up. But unless and until the Supreme Court rules on it, you have to follow what's in your circuit. And if there's nothing in your circuit yet, then you're going to try to go and argue in front of those appeals courts that they should follow these circuits and not these circuits, right? So, let's see, psychological harm can be considered persecution, especially in the context of children. If they've had to watch their parents be persecuted in particular, can be very traumatizing for them. These are just some more examples. Economic harm, having to walk for a day and a half of water, earning only $7 a week, being denied schooling and medical care in Guatemala was persecution. Having to pay a fine equal to 20 months' salary, losing one's job, being blacklisted from other government employment, and having furniture and household appliances confiscated was persecution. But being fined, and that is not how you spell fined, I apologize, 60 months income, and after paying half of that, having your home entertainment equipment confiscated was not persecution. Let's see, denial of housing, education, public services, denial of police protection. And they look at it in the aggregate. So, you may not have, maybe you haven't been physically harmed. If you're in one of those circuits that says that you don't have to be physically harmed for it to amount to persecution, but everything else adds up together, then maybe you can make your argument that you have been persecuted and you can't be sent home. Yes, sir.
once a determination is made in one place, can that person go shop for another place, or is it just done? It has been determined?
So you have 7 days to appeal the decision, but you would, I don't think you'd be able to do that. Now, I've not looked to confirm that. I'm doubtful that, I think you'd just be sent back. Do you guys know? I don't think you can.
I mean,
I wouldn't know, but I would think that if it's happening in the immigration court system, we probably could not bring the same case
Yeah.
within the same system.
yeah.
So I think
Yeah,
that would.
so you have to appeal it within the 7 days and then one shot and done.
What was the question?
He asked whether you could, so if you're denied in one circuit or one court system, could you move to another one? So you could potentially try to, we call it forum shopping, and you're not supposed to do it, but you know, you could, it's gonna be where you live, so you could try to move before you submit your application, but there's a lot of uncertainty in asylum. And then it talks about who's the persecutor. It can't just be, you know, your brother beat you up and you can't go home. It's got to be connected to the government action or inaction. You have to show that the government was either unable or unwilling to help you. And you can think about like a lot of these countries where the cartels are running things. That would be a situation where maybe the police and the government won't help you because they can't. So who the persecutor is key. These are just some of the bars to asylum. If there's a third country that's safe for them, they might have to go there. You have to file within 1 year coming into the U.S., which is important. A lot of people may not know that. So if you don't figure that out in time, then you can't apply for it. Let's see. Yeah, there you go. Can't file previously denied. So there's your answer right there. Exception for extraordinary circumstances. You can't be the persecutor. You can't have persecuted and then subject yourself for an asylum case. And this talks about driving a woman to an involuntary abortion clinic precluded that man. I assume it was a man. I guess it didn't say. Precluded that person from an asylum petition because he was a persecutor in that case. Let's see. Talks about commander can be held accountable for acts that they're men. So if you are above men that commit these that commit persecution, then you might not be able to come. And it doesn't matter what the motivation of the asylum applicant was if they were persecuting. So if that guy, you know, was being paid $1 million and it was either $1 million or don't feed your kids the next day, it doesn't matter. Intention doesn't matter there. And then it says that it's unclear whether they would have an exception for duress. So in that case, I guess if they're taking your kid and they're forcing you to do something, you might be able to make an argument. And then statutory bars, and this is for a lot of them, crimes, if terroristic activity, and then you have discretionary denials. They have a lot of discretion, the immigration officers. So sometimes you could come in and be very convincing and they'll believe you, or maybe they're in a bad mood that day and they don't want to believe you and they deny it. So a lot of it's the luck of the officer. And that's across the board. That's with USCIS too. Sometimes you'll have great officers and they're amazing, and sometimes you have ones that are just in a bad mood and they take it out on you. In fact, and if you speak to him, you wouldn't know that he's from India unless he's talking to other Indians and then the accent comes out. And occasionally, I also sound like an Indian. Apparently, they make a lot of fun of me for that. It just happens. I'm either full Arkansas redneck or Indian. I don't know. Let's see. So you might be able to file for a withholding and removal. I've not done work in asylum. So a lot of this I've learned for this purpose. So I don't know that much about withholding a removal or the Convention Against Torture, and I'm sorry I don't know more about it for you guys. If you would like to know more and you want to reach out to me, feel free. I'm always happy to take questions and learn more, and I intend to have this slideshow for any presentations that are needed and improve upon it from today. So, then bars to relief. If you've been convicted of a heinous crime, non-political crimes, I think we already talked about that anyway. This tells the process for if you want to apply under the Convention Against Torture. Again, you gotta show credible fear of persecution. Alright, so what is a green card? A green card is called an I-551. That is your permanent residence. So lawful permanent residence has a green card. So when you hear green card or permanent resident, those are the same things. This tells you what it takes to maintain it. You have to live in the U.S. For at least 6 months out of every year. And if you don't, then if you try to go apply for citizenship, you may not be allowed to, you may be denied. And they could also potentially take away your permanent resident status, but you can usually file to just get it back. That's usually pretty easy. I don't know what the status is right now though, with all of the chaos that's going on. DACA? Okay, yes, okay. So DACA is just deferred action for childhood arrivals. There's a lot of requirements that have to be met to apply for that, to qualify for that. And again, this is another one of those that's, there's a lot of uncertainty in that status, so it's not a great way to live. Then becoming American, these are some of the requirements there. You actually have to take an English test, an oath of allegiance. If you immigrated if you became a permanent resident on an employment visa, then you qualify after 5 years of permanent residency. If you married somebody, you qualify after 3 years and can apply. And I won't spend a lot of time because I do want to get to the questions, but these are just some of the requirements.
Can you lose the naturalization if you're out of the United States for so many years?
Say that again?
Can you lose being a natural citizen if you're out of the United States for so many years?
No, you can't lose your citizenship. No, that they can't take away. Only in very rare circumstances, though they are trying to do it right now, which is really scary. They just announced that, and they tried to do it before, and I think they're gonna face a lot of backlash doing that. But I heard that they want to try to denaturalize 200 people a month. They want to set quotas, and that's horrendous because I don't know, if you know immigrants or if you've immigrated yourself, but as the wife of an immigrant, that relief that he felt when he was finally a citizen, right? Like he didn't have to worry about his papers all the time anymore, and they keep up with their papers, and he didn't have to worry about another application or another interview. He got to live, and so now for them to suggest that that's a possibility for any of the people that have naturalized, it's unconscionable. Good moral character. This is one thing that is a requirement for naturalization. So you can't commit terrible crimes. There's crimes against moral turpitude. Turpitude is one of them that they don't ever really tell us what it means, but you can gather. There it talks about some more. Let's see. I'm gonna keep.
What was the last one on that?
Which one? This one? Was it habitual drunkard? Yeah, and they can. So like, how are they gonna know? Well, if you've had multiple DUIs, right? They can deem you as a habitual drunkard. And if you guys want copies of the slides, I'm happy to send them out. I can talk, like, I like to bring this, and I tell people this is like the Cliff's Note version of immigration law, so we could truly be here for weeks. So it was hard for me to, yes.
Are people interested in getting the slides? She could email them to me, and if you put your email on our sign-in list, maybe, and just put an asterisk or something, you want the slides, and I could email them out, would that be?
Yeah, that's perfect.
That would be the one way we could do that.
So she had asked me to talk about the suspension of the immigrant visa processing. It wasn't for everywhere, but these are some of the countries. I think it's at 75 right now. countries where they've suspended immigrant visa processing. Dual nationals that are applying with a passport from another place that's not listed up there can still apply. And children, they just updated it to say that children being adopted by Americans can still have their visas issued. But for those other countries,
They can or they can't?
they can. They just changed it
Okay.
to but that he does by executive order and does that a lot. But there's a lot of litigation pending. It's gonna be going. We're gonna pay a lot of money to fight this, and they're gonna pay the government's gonna pay a lot of money to fight it back with it. So, and then these are just some fact or fictions about whether they abuse the immigration or the welfare system. There's a lot of laws in place already about that. They are not usually allowed public assistance. They aren't allowed federal public assistance. The assistance that they get will probably be from the state or a locality. But even that can be really difficult to qualify for. Let's see. There's a thing called an affidavit of support, and this I just want to talk about real fast, and I'll click through the slides while I do it. But the affidavit of support is like, if you are a citizen filing for someone, you're sponsoring an immigrant, you actually have to file what's called an affidavit of support and swear to the government, and it is an enforceable contract, that if they ever apply for federal assistance, you will reimburse them for your sponsored immigrants' federal assistance. And that actually stays even if you get divorced. Doesn't matter. Until one of you die, until they leave the country, or they become a citizen, or they have worked enough for 40 credits of Social Security. But they do contribute a ton, and I've got a lot of resources. They contribute a ton to our economy, to our GDP. They put in a lot more than they take out. They are required to file taxes, even if they're not allowed to work. They have to get an ITIN number. And if they don't, and they someday qualify, magically, then they may not be allowed, like if becomes a path for them, right? They may never be allowed to apply for it because if they didn't pay their taxes. These are all, I'm sorry. Any questions though? I'll just click through these and see if there's anything like.
Well, a lot of these seem to be the talking points, that they're taking benefits, that they're voting when they're not supposed to. And it all seems to be they imply this, but they don't provide any proof.
Right. Well, and one thing that I find interesting is, and I actually had a client recently who he became a permanent resident, and he started getting applications for Medicare, and age-wise and income-wise would qualify for it. But thank goodness he knows me, because I could tell him you don't qualify until 5 years of living in the U.S., until 5 years of legally being in the U.S. as a permanent resident. And so a lot of people, they're not going to know that, right? So if they get the application, they may apply for it. And I think that's probably where the supposed fraud usually comes in. I know with the voting, when people get registered to vote, a lot of times it's because they've gone to the DMV and there's a confusion there, and they just pass it on, right? Like they just register them, because you can automatically register when you go get your driver's license. So I think really the solution there is just better training of the people that work in these places, and maybe some information for the immigrants themselves. But I think the best thing that we could do is train the employees to know when people do and don't qualify, because you can't expect, there's so much to know out there, right? And sometimes they don't speak our languages, and a lot of times it's, the norms are very different from where they're coming from, and so let's just make it easier, instead of trying to make them into bad people first. Let's not set them up to fail.
So let's go ahead and have any other questions, and then we will have a few minutes with Jordan in the back, okay?
Yes, sir.
see if I can put this right. When you were talking about the different circuit court decisions and how it, it can be different from a very liberal to a very conservative circuit, and those rulings apply to anyone within that circuit. The old adage of ignorance of the law is not an excuse is fine, but when you've got 13 different circuits that are each defining the law their own way, what resources are there for people to actually understand what law applies to them based on those decisions?
That's a great question. I just go to all my law books. They're all virtual now, but that's a good question. I don't know if there's a website available that compiles that. There could be maybe an attorney website out there that puts it together, but I haven't seen it, but that's a great question. If you'll email me that, I'll try to find, if I can find anything, if you don't mind, because I will definitely forget it, but I'm happy to answer it. And anytime you guys have questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to. I think there's one more.
Is there anything else that, what finalizes those 13 disparate decisions? Is it something finally getting kicked up to the Supreme Court, who will probably not do anything particularly productive? But
Yes, if you want one, if they want to have one overarching ruling to control all the circuits, it has to go to the Supreme Court, and they'll tell us. And it's not that uncommon. Usually things end up at the Supreme Court if the Supreme Court thinks it's an issue, but sometimes they won't. But there's a lot of issues that will have circuit splits. But for immigration in particular, I'm not sure how you find those, but I'm more than happy to try to look for it. Yes, ma'am.
Are there laws that, against an employer or even a manager, an HR person, against them knowingly hiring people who aren't legally here to work? I think about when you watch television and you see all these black and brown people scooped up, say, at a meatpacking plant. The managers and the HR people and the owners and the shareholders often aren't, they're white American citizens. Is that illegal for them to do that? Because I never see those guys going out in handcuffs.
Well, and I think that that's a huge point to make. We're going after people that are just trying to better their lives, and they're bound by whatever situation they're in. And then we've got people that take advantage of that, and then the people that are just trying to make it in life are the ones that get in trouble, and the people that take advantage don't. And I do think that's a big issue. And I've heard, and this is, we can maybe talk about this one-on-one because I don't want to go into everything, but I've heard that there's a way that they can do it on a temporary basis, and then they have to fire them in a certain time before like their E-Verify has to go through. So I've heard that that's a way that some places do it. I don't know that that's true, but that's what I've been hearing. And then, but yeah, you're right. And actually, part of that, that's what I want to see. I want to see more accountability on the employers. I would like to see, so like, for example, for the H-1B, the employer owns that visa, right? What I would like to see is that the immigrant own the visa. And actually, I'd really love a national database for all those jobs that they want to post, because they're already required to post the jobs in certain places, like where they work, to open it up for other people so that they can prove that they can't fill that job with an American citizen or a permanent resident. So what if we just had a national database, and then all of the American citizens and permanent residents can look and fill those jobs, and then if they can't fill them, well then you can let the students coming out of school go into those jobs, or you can let people not in the country apply for that visa and own that visa and go where they can go. But when that employer owns that visa, right, you are bound to that employer. You can't work anywhere else. And you see a lot of times where they're overworked, underpaid. I see it a lot. And it's a huge problem, and I think that's one way we can solve it is giving a little more freedom to the immigrants. That's a great question. Yes, ma'am.
Well, when a person with a green card applies for a job, they have to fill out a special form with their green card number and so on. I don't think it's the employer's duty to verify that.
No, there is, there is now, they have a I-9 form, and they have to verify immigration status. I don't think it was always that way, but it is that way right now.
Good question.
Yes.
So I didn't run this by before. So when my family was going through this, obviously what happens is it didn't match the presentation because they're breaking the laws. That they're not following the laws, and I'm not talking about my family, I'm the government. But so I asked my brother because they were sent back to an active force. They bombed the building next door like within a few days. And I said, Lance, we signed a treaty that makes this illegal. That you can't send a refugee or an asylum seeker back to where they have, I think it's imminent harm, and that would mean bombs, per my understanding. And my understanding is that treaties are the supreme law of the land. And so that makes me wonder, I didn't try to interfere with their process or insert myself in it, though I learned about it. You know, why aren't we following the treaties that we signed that are now the supreme law of the land? And where is the recourse for the United States breaking treaties like that? The Native American. Yeah. We're not good at treaties, huh?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's wrong. I mean, you know, the recourse is going to come if there's a turnover in Congress. Potentially the international courts could do something about it, but I don't think that's going to happen, at least not anytime soon. Though we are looking, you know, we are seeing they're opening up the Epstein file investigations in other countries. So who knows? But yeah, I mean, when the government's not, that is the whole point, right, of our Constitution. Sorry, now I'm gonna get on my. But it's the whole point of our Constitution is to protect the people from a rogue government, from an overreaching government. And so what do? We've got to come together and demand that they follow our laws. And if they don't, then we gotta get rid of them.
Give them a different job.
Yeah, they need to resign. They don't belong there.
I think for the sake of time, and I appreciate everyone's comments, we're gonna pause and let's thank Anne for her presentation. And we'll visit about how to share the slides if you're interested. Again, let me know and I can email them out to you. We're going to give, next month we're having a film screening. Women for Kansas is having a film screening called She Dared to Dream. It's about Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley from Massachusetts, which I think is a kind of a fun connection. Massachusetts and, you know, Lawrence, Kansas and Mass Street and everything. Immigrant Society. But anyway, and we're going to have a panel discussion following that led by Representative Barbara Ballard. Senator Francisco is also going to serve on the panel, Brooklyn Mosley, and Ursula Miner from NAACP. So what can we do? Call to action. What can we do? Contact your legislators. We've got phone numbers, postcards, addresses in the back. Build your community. If you're in a book club, suggest you read some books about democracy and what's happening now. If you're not, you can come to Women for Kansas, Tuesday, February 24th. This month's book is Giving Up is Unforgivable by Joyce Vance. Follow somebody like Joyce Vance, Heather Cox Richardson, Robert Wright. Get your resources. We can't do everything, but we can all do something. And we can redress our government. That is a constitutional right. So, support the press. Oh, Rapid Response Networks, there's their phone numbers. Support the press. Freedom of the press is under attack. Journalists are being arrested. There's financial takeover of organizations, then with a narrowing of the focus and limiting of expression. So support your local newspaper, Lawrence Journal World. Support online, Lawrence Times. Support Kansas Reflector, Loud Light, other organizations, Kansas Appleseed. Build your community. And I have a poem written by German pastor Martin Niemöller in 1946 after living through Hitler's Germany. He wrote the words, "First they came for the socialists. I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists. I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." We're not free unless everyone's free. Otherwise, it's white privilege, it's privilege. So let's do our part, let's all do something. Thank you all for being here today. You're doing something, you're being here. Thank you.